Hi, this is Desaliny, and you're watching episode 16 of 90s Overlooked Underheard. So, over the last two episodes of 90s Overlooked Underheard, we've been dealing with two quite heavy kind of bands and their albums, quite emotionally charged. And I think as a change of pace today, we're going to look at some kind of lighter, kind of breezier, more kind of pop-centered music. Specifically kind of, I guess you'd call it either indie pop or indie rock. There is a dividing line in this somewhere where one becomes a little harder, and I guess you'd call it rock rather than pop. But I think these kind of bands would often be able to express themselves in a kind of a quieter, poppier sense, or they could kind of turn everything up a little bit and rock out more. So I'm quite happy kind of putting both of these bands in that kind of category, even though they're both quite different propositions. So the first band we'd be talking about today is Versus, and their 1994 album from May of 1994, The Stars Are Insane. So Versus formed in 1990 in New York City around the core members, Richard Balliot and Fontaine Toups. Both Richard and Fontaine sang in the band, Richard being the guitarist, songwriter, and Fontaine playing the bass. At various points throughout the band's existence, two other of the Balliot brothers, James and Ed, were part of Versus. And in fact, on this album, on The Stars Are Insane, Ed plays drums. So I think the defining kind of sound and the defining kind of characteristics of Versus are kind of a lightness. And I think that's kind of very apparent in the vocal interplay between Richard and Fontaine. They would, again, both take lead vocals, but they would also kind of harmonize very nicely together. There's plenty of that kind of Pixies influenced loud, quiet, dynamic stuff, which was kind of beloved of alternative and indie kind of rock bands of this period. But I think, like the Poster Children back in episode 12, this is definitely, as I said earlier, breezier. It's a lighter kind of take on the grunge sound of the day. There's an emphasis on different textures in the guitars. Everything's just not all turned up to kind of rock levels. The songs kind of switch from clean to distorted to kind of dreamy modes kind of effortlessly. And the writing here is very, very song focused. There's less kind of jamming, less kind of improvisational type of music. I think they're basically pop songs first and foremost, and that shines through. Straight into some key tracks, I guess. The opener, Thera, kind of begins with quite a delicately picked tremolo guitar line, which kind of leads into a clean, very chimey kind of strummed verse. But again, the loud, quiet dynamics straight away. The verse transitions to the chorus, which is angrier, more distorted, edgier, with some nice harmonies from Richard and Fontaine on this. There are some genuine kind of ba-ba-ba vocals, very, very pop. But it does still have that kind of melancholic edge. And as if to kind of hammer home that it's a classic pop song, it's about a girl. Richard sings, she asked her to marry me. She said, write it in a song, as long as it doesn't take long. Yeah, it's a kind of simple, catchy, cool, dramatic little pop song. It's great. There's also a character at the center of the song, River, but I think in this case it sounds very much like it's a real person, because judging by the lyrics of this song, it sounds as if it is about the recently deceased at that time actor River Phoenix. There's references to playing roles and seeing you in LA, and there's a line which says, the last time I saw River, he was lying face down. He fell down. face down. But again, this is kind of melancholic, edgy pop music. Again, the song features kind of a trading between the verse and chorus of lead vocals between Richard and Fontaine, this kind of boy-girl kind of swapping over of roles throughout the song. It just gives them a kind of a lightness and a nimbleness that is kind of missing in a lot of the grunge music of that period, I think. And I think this kind of this mode they had of writing, you can pick up all the stylistic tricks, the loud, quiet dynamics and things like that, and the general air of a kind of a sweeter, kind of poppier edge to the music. But when they need to, they do kind of push that big kind of noisy panic button on occasion with some really good results. So there's kind of a snaky kind of mean guitar riff running throughout Deseret, which has got this slightly atonal edge, which reminds me of kind of Sonic Youth at their kind of poppiest. And you also hear kind of an edgier, noisier sound in the kind of these blaring, kind of fuzzed up chord stabs, which you hear in a song like Wind Me Up. They just drop out of nowhere into the middle of this kind of genteel, kind of strummy pop song. They're just real head turners. Yeah, there's not a lot else really to say about this album. If you like the kind of melodic indie rock kind of styles of the mid-90s, there are other bands I could name which were kind of probably more famous, more recognized. Bands like Pavement and Yola Tango and Spoon and Built to Spill, Sleater Kinney. It's very much in that camp of the stuff that was on the poppier, cleaner, scruffier side of grunge. If you like that kind of music, you will love this album. It's still a great listen, even today. So next up, we have the first kind of non-English language album, I think, of this list. I'm not counting The Young Gods because TV Sky was mostly sung in English. But anyway, the album that's second today is L'Etat MOI by Blumfeld, which was released in August of 1994. Blumfeld were a German band formed in Hamburg in about 1990. Formed around the kind of the core member, the main singer, the main songwriter, Jochen Distelmeier. He wrote all the band's lyrics. Blumfeld's lineup changed several times over the band's career, but at this point, they also had Elke Bohiken playing bass and Andre Rate on drums. So within their home country, within Germany, they built quite a reputation as kind of one of the biggest bands of the kind of German indie or alternative scene of the 90s going through to the noughties, I think. But this album kind of marks, I think, a high point in terms of their international recognition. They had been playing and touring with Pavement on a European tour. And I'm not sure whether this happened, which way round this happened, but this album was released on Big Cat. So either Big Cat put the bands together as a touring package, or maybe because Blumfeld's profile was so high and their reviews were so good from these shows with Pavement, that maybe Big Cat Records, the UK Big Cat Records, picked the album up for distribution outside of Germany. So I think Blumfeld's sound has echoes of a number of indie alternative touchstones of that period. The kind of semi-spoken vocal style of Jochen does put me in mind of people like Marky Smith of The Fall, or even Jonathan Richman, or Steve Malkmus himself would kind of veer into kind of semi-spoken vocal styles. But in fact, this does have kind of a longer tradition in kind of German music. There's a term for it, which is Sprechgesang, spoken singing. It's been a feature of kind of German opera and kind of musical theatre going back hundreds of years. So it's quite interesting that there is a tradition of that in German music. But for the rest of the band, yeah, you hear this kind of clean, kind of scouring, biting, kind of chiming guitar tones. It's got quite a precise, rhythmic, kind of choppy feel. Channels a little of that, kind of that held in, kind of funky style of Gang of Four. There's just a smidge of that in there. But they could veer between kind of having a very precise style and this kind of blurred, faster single note melodies and chords. I also hear kind of hints of that kind of, hyper kind of strumming style, the fast strumming style of bands like The Wedding Present, particularly during their kind of their mid to late 80s period. And you occasionally do hear some of that kind of that drum beat, that motoric kind of drum beat that you heard other kind of contemporary bands of that time picking up on. I'm thinking of acts like Stereolab or Tortoise. Yeah, Blumfeld sounds kind of quite an interesting synthesis of kind of cleaner, kind of poppier elements with some slightly kind of edgier, identifiably alt sounds and textures. I'm going to have a hard time picking the lyrics apart on this. I did study a little German at high school, kind of GCSE level. But yeah, I'm nowhere near competent enough to kind of decipher Jochen's lyrics here. But what I can tell you is that they are quite layered and literary, and they're very thoughtful from what I gather. There's a lot of allusions to films and other music and books and writers. And there's a lot of kind of wordplay and interesting use of words. I may not be able to pull apart the lyrics, but the title of the album itself is a huge kind of giveaway here. It's called L'Etat MOI. This is French, of course. But then if you try and kind of pull apart that seemingly small phrase, the fact that they use capital letters throughout on the album sleeve kind of hides away the meaning a bit. Is it l'état with a capital E, meaning the state, the country? In other words, the country, the state, and me. Or is it l'état with a lowercase e, meaning, my state, the state I'm in, and me? And of course, there's another level on top of that. The title kind of alludes to the very famous quote by Louis XIV, where he said, L'état c'est moi, meaning I am the state. So, yeah, there's some serious thought into the kind of the multi-layered kind of interpretations behind that title. So some key tracks. The opening track, Draußen auf Kaution, which translates as Out on Bail. It's got a very kind of slow burn opening with the sound of helicopters flying low overhead, going from one speaker to the next. And then a simple kind of octave bass line enters. And you get this kind of rippling, rising and falling guitar melody, these clipped, clean, kind of very layered, structured guitars, which kind of gain momentum, and they kind of get hazier and blurrier as the song kind of works itself up towards the conclusion. It's kind of got quite a low-key, downcast feel, but it hints at kind of something epic, something bigger. It's a really good song. Eine eigene Geschichte, again, meaning kind of a story of its own, or a unique story. It kind of amps up the approach from that opening song. It's faster, it's harder hitting. It uses similar kind of guitar sounds. This kind of blurring of the guitars when you get to the chorus, the kind of the nagging verse kind of structures. But this is the first point, really, where you pick up on Jochen's habit of dropping in small kind of English phrases, which make you kind of sit up and take notice. In the middle of the song, he sings, "First we take Manhattan." And you kind of, did I just hear that? Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. But the song itself is this fantastic driving kind of relentless kind of almost kind of panicked, confused type sound. Yeah, it sounds very, very urgent. Again, really good song. Yeah, other songs. Yeah, Verstärker, which translates as amplifier. That really kind of channels a kind of a 90s fall type sound, but mixed with kind of that lightness, that airiness, that breathiness of Stereolab. But yeah, they punctuate it with these kind of drop-ins of just like howling guitar feedback, and the drums kind of snap harder as well. Yeah, you hear references to, in this song, you hear a reference to The Reflecting Skin, the cult Philip Ridley film of around about this period, the early 90s. Yeah, and there are hints of that kind of, that detached kind of polemic style of Gang of Four, just the kind of the snap and the rhythm. I wouldn't call it funky, but you get a feel of that kind of driving urgency again. This is very urgent music, and I think this is a really great song. It might be the best song on the album. Yeah, I think urgency is the word. If I had to pick one word to describe this album, it sounds kind of switched on and focused, and as if it means business. Ich, wie es wirklich war, has this kind of urgent, it's almost got a feeling of like London Calling by The Clash, the way it starts, really jabbing strong chords. Yeah, the urgency permeates everything. It sounds like Jochen is desperately trying to make himself understood. He's desperately trying to communicate something. And the fact that he's prepared to kind of drop in these English language phrases to emphasize certain elements of the music suggests he was thinking outside of German music scenes. It sounds like he had a message that he was trying to communicate. So I hadn't listened to this album for quite a while, and I had really forgotten quite how good it was. It's a remarkably kind of consistent, lean, urgent sounding record. You really want to hear the next track. I'd urge you to kind of experience it for yourself. I may not be able to translate everything for you, but if you just let it kind of permeate a little, there'll be bits in there which you'll be interested enough to want to kind of try and translate yourself, which is much easier nowadays with things like Google. So yeah, I recommend you really give this one a good listen, and you might find something in it that you haven't heard before. So that's it for this episode. Usual suggestions are below, and I'd really like it if you came back again and joined me for another episode of 90s Overlooked Underheard. Take care.